Perfect. And you can see my screen okay?
Yes, looks good.
Awesome. So today marks the first part series about IT security for libraries. Today we're focusing on securing your library space from an IT perspective. Then the next two parts are dark web and privacy, and then disaster recovery. So today, most of our focus is what can we do to improve our security from an IT standpoint within our library. We're going to cover kind of like a wide range of different topics. At any point we can dive deeper if you like. I left us enough time at the end of this webinar today to kind of dive in more and have conversations about like what ifs, what should I do's, but I'll give you like the high level overview and summary. So if we're looking at breaches from the first half of 2016, as you can see from the chart, everyone was impacted in some fashion or another, and we as libraries can balance between the financial and education sections in terms of data breaches where attackers are coming in from the outside to steal our data. And what they do with that data can be ranged from them selling it or to manipulating it or to stealing identities. You can find out a lot about a person based off of like what they even check out. In terms of data records themselves, and that's a very scary amount of records that were stolen just in the first half of 2016 alone. I couldn't find a full 2016 year in review. I guess they're still tallying the totals. But if you think about it, the importance of security, especially now, is more important than ever in terms of even protecting our privacy, protecting what we do, as well as all the assets that we have in our library space. I think we sometimes overlook that, like from a corporate angle, the only things that people need to focus on, or IT teams focus on, is their own assets. But from a public space, when we have people bringing in their own content and their own devices, we also have to be cognizant of what we need to protect their stuff as well, because they're connecting to our network. And anything that happens to them while they're connected to us is kind of our responsibility. And I probably should have thought of this ahead of time, but I'm not sure if all of you are IT within the IT section of your library spaces, or if you are just kind of general where you're filling both roles. So I'm trying to keep this not too technical and keeping it general. So if we talk about the cost of breaches, and so one of the big things I always hear people say is, oh, well, we're just a library. No one's going to attack us. We don't have anything important. But that's really not true. Anyone can be breached. Anyone can be attacked. Anyone can be made a target. If you think about the costs that are associated with with somebody's data being stolen, and just that part alone ranges from about $158. Other people say about $250 per record, depending on industry. So a healthcare record, for instance, would cost a lot more to recover in terms of financial fees. As you can see from the chart below, you're going to pay quite a lot if something happens to your data, or something is stolen from your network, if it relates to patron data or a user's data, or people that come in and out of the library space. And so the importance of preparing and mitigating that potential cost is should be a focus. With that being said, we can ask, why do people, or what would happen if someone does steal our data or attacks us in any way? Most obvious is people lose faith in what we do. When Home Depot got hacked and when Target got hacked, there was an instant loss of faith within the business. People weren't as comfortable utilizing those services and resources. And at any point, feel free to interrupt with questions as well. So then you lose business. People stop coming into the library. If your patrons stop trusting what you do and trusting that they're safe, they're going to stop using your services. There's also a ton of financial costs, as I stated earlier, and that could be anywhere from the government saying, hey, you need to buy this type of hardware, and you have to do it now, and they can do that. And they can also impede on fines and make you pay a penalty, as well as the penalties you're paying out to anyone that lost their data or has a possibility of getting their identity stolen. And the last piece is business continuity. If something happens to your organization, whether it's an attack that brings your network down, or it's data being taken out in any frame up, you're going to lose business opportunity. People won't be coming into your library spaces that day. People won't be checking in and out content for a while. Whatever the disaster is, your continuity or your business can't operate as fully as it normally can. And so it's very important that you keep a handle on all these types of threats. And I'm going to talk about the threats today. So why do people even attack us, or people attack in general? Some of the times it's financial gain. So if I wanted to fluctuate, if I was a hacker group and I was getting paid to fluctuate stock prices of Target, I would hit Target really hard and steal all their data, so then their stock market goes down, or their stock costs go down, and then I can impact and then improve, let's say, Walmart stock, because then people aren't going to shop at Target. Where are they going to go instead? They can also do it to sell information. So if I'm able to buy a whole bunch of content or steal a whole bunch of content about your library, whether that's files, brochures, even simple stuff, security passwords, or serial keys for software licensing, whatever it might be, I can steal all that and sell it and make quite a bit of money as a hacker. The other thing is data theft. So people might want to steal data from a single person. So what a hacker would do, they would attack an entire organization to get just one person, because that's how data works. And they're not going to search and look for the one person. They're going to just take it all and then figure out what they want to do from it there. The other piece is with an attack, whether they're stealing records or they're controlling your machines remotely in order to make like a botnet. In either way, they would sell that bundle as like a collection, and they would sell it on the dark web. And other times, it's literally just because people are bored and they can do it. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that are out there that are free, readily available, with tons of documentation on how to use it. But those tools were designed to show people what types of threats were there, but people can easily tweak it to make it an attacking tool, or make it a tool of destruction. The other thing we're going to kind of cover today is we can't prevent all risk. Nothing is unhackable. Everything has a security flaw, and everything can be exploited, especially when we talk about people. People is always the weakest link in a IT security plan, because they're easier to manipulate, easier to control. And so the idea of what we're going to talk about today is putting as many safeguards as possible to mitigate that risk, to mitigate an attack, to mitigate data loss, to mitigate somebody taking our entire network or infrastructure down. So when we're thinking about what do we need to protect, there's a very, very large range of things we have to be aware of, from websites. So if we're hosting anything out of our network that people can access externally, whether that's our home page or our easy proxy to get to online databases, those are things we have to protect and make sure people can't use that as a backdoor into our network or infrastructure. If you have an integrated library system, what kind of traffic is being generated to and from, we have to make sure we protect that. Staff computers and patron computers, and those are things that we own as the library, our assets. We want to make sure we protect them from either theft or being hacked or data being stolen from it, as well as the activity done on the computers. So if I think about a patron, let's say a patron sits down on a patron computer and somebody has earlier installed a keylogger, so now they're able to watch whatever anyone types in, and I can watch that person type in a password for their bank. It's my responsibility as an IT professional to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so we have to make sure we protect what they even do on the network. And whether that's I'm connecting wirelessly from my cell phone, we want to make sure that whatever's going on, whatever conversations I'm having, is protected and private. On the other side of the coin, we have all of our data that we store in our library, whether that's data about our patrons. And you might go, hey, we don't actually save any of that data because we don't want to ever have to give it up. Wonderful. But there's still files we have about survey data. We still save that. There's names on surveys sometimes. Or there's program data where we're inviting people or taking interviews. Whatever it may be, there's still probably personal information on our drives. If we're taking pictures of patrons, for instance, to store them for saving for later, that's still data we need to be aware of that we have. And some people will be very upset if that type of data gets out. And then we have our assets, our business assets, and that could even be our printers, our keyboards, our mice, etc. And then personal assets, assets that people bring into the library to utilize within the library. So if I'm bringing my laptop in again, we got to figure out ways to make sure that's protected. And so I always like to say encompass it as, from an IT security standpoint, anything and everything that is plugged in, it is our responsibility to make sure it's secure, or as secure as possible. So if I'm talking about from end to end and all the different, where all these pieces fall in, we have data coming in from the outside through a modem, which is on the far left, and data is then eventually routed to our end users to their phones, laptops, computers, printers, etc. In the middle is our routers, our firewalls, our switches, and our servers to help manage and protect and move traffic through. And so when we're talking about IT security, that's the whole gambit of things we have to cover and protect. So when we're talking about our outer defenses, so the area to the far left here, outside router firewall, those are our first line of defense. And there's things that we can do to help protect us quite quickly. And that's including, if we have multiple buildings, we can set up VPNs. So they're encrypted, and traffic that goes between Site A and Site B is encrypted and protected over what's called a virtual private network. Then from a firewall standpoint, or even a router standpoint, we can have protection with IDS or IPS, which stands for Intrusion Detection System, which basically will alert you if something happens. And then something better, which is Intrusion Protection Systems, will actually prevent, mitigate, cancel, block, etc., of an attack that's coming in. So, for instance, I worked at a library where we were getting attacked from a location in China once, where they were just bombarding our external firewall until it would go down, and they would continually hit it. And so what the IPS system did was, so hey, hold on, this person's trying to hit us multiple times over a short period of time. Let's just block them. And so it would block that IP address all automatically. The other thing is web filtering. And so we can dance around web filtering all day if it's good or bad. But there's content within web filtering that actually can help protect you. It can actually filter out websites that aren't legitimate. It can tell you to always use websites that have HTTPS in the header. And so they can do good things other than just filter what websites you can view. And then they can also do antivirus at the web level. So if a website has malicious code on it, the firewall can detect and read that code before it hits the computer and stop that website from loading. And at the same time, depending on what company you're using for your hardware, if it detects that a computer is sending out malicious code, as in if the computer is infected or it's part of a botnet or something along those lines, it will actually terminate the connection to the rest of the network. It will block that entire computer from accessing the rest of your web, the rest of your environment, which is really good for, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, the CryptoLocker virus that will actually span out across your network and trying to encrypt all of your files so you can't get to them ever again unless you pay money. But at the end of the day, the idea of our firewalls and our routers is to protect our inbound connections, so data coming into our space, and as well as data going out of our library. They make some really sweet products now that utilize a thing called Unified Threat Management, or abbreviated to UTM. Essentially what it is a single box that does it all. So there's no hopping or there's no bypassing of the web filtering to get to a computer. Everything has to go through a single box, and that single box will do all of your web filtering, your antivirus, your firewall, your VPN, your intrusion protection systems, as well as some of them will even do asset management. So if it sees a new device on the network that you haven't configured yet, it won't let you do anything until you say, hey, this device is legitimate. And so one of my favorite products out there is a company called Fortinet. And they have a really good support team behind them that will make sure that your environment is pretty secure. And again, nothing's 100% secure, but they do a very good job of doing updates on a routine basis to ensure maximum protection. So areas that can be attacked from our outer network. All of our external facing applications, as I stated before, with like our websites. Anything with an external IP. For the IT folks, that's like your NAT, your one-to-ones, etc. that will take one of your static IPs and allow it to be routed to an internal device. If we're hosting a website or custom-built application or easy proxy connection. Those are all external applications that we want to protect, not only from a standpoint of somebody trying to shut it down, but taking it over to then attack the rest of the network. So if I was a really good hacker, I would work really hard on, let's say, getting into your easy proxy server, which runs on Linux. I can get into there, and then I can actually install different applications to sniff your network and find out what else you're doing on your network once I get through that connection. Make sense? The other piece is all of our internal applications that we utilize. And so we want to make sure some of that data doesn't escape our network, such as our files, our Active Directory accounts, usernames and passwords, our patron records, DNS routing. So we want to make sure that our DNS server that manages what sites go where is maintained and it isn't falsified. And then outbound traffic, we want to end up knowing that it actually leaves the network and is going to where it's supposed to, and who's connecting to what. And so those are what our firewalls and our routers will help manage. So different types of attacks that people employ. The three main ones are man-in-the-middle attack, where essentially an individual or a device sits between a conversation and listens to what's going on, and then altering that transmission. So one of the, I'd say this lightly, but most fun exercise is DNS spoofing. So when I lived in an apartment, what we did, because people would try to connect to our network all the time, is we set up fake DNS boxes. So we set up a fake Facebook page where when people would log on to our wireless network, we would tell the network that, hey, Facebook isn't located in California, it's actually located in my own house. And here's the Facebook server. And they would see what they would think is an actual Facebook page. And when they go to log into it, it then threw a splash page saying, don't use other people's wireless networks. It was fun. It made us all laugh. But it's surprising how people are so confident about the websites they see and how they're ready to give out the data to it. And so teaching your users how to identify if someone's trying to trick you from a login standpoint is very, very important. And so, and I gave you a link if you wanted to play around at home. Denial of service attacks or distributed denial of service attacks is essentially taking a large group of computers and telling it to all try to access a single computer at once or a single device at once or a network entry point. And the idea is that through a whole bunch of traffic and a whole bunch of hits, you can bring down a server. And whether that bringing it down will destroy the server forever and make it unrecoverable. So Linux boxes, for instance, have a log file, and it's a known issue that if that log file exceeds its size amount, it can actually corrupt the rest of your system to a point where you can't get back into it. And so it's very, very important that you monitor for those things. And if you see a box all of a sudden getting pinged way too many times out of its ordinary threshold, so if someone's trying to access Easy Proxy 1,000 times in a minute, chances are something's going on and you want to prevent it. Things you can do when that's happening is just gracefully shut down the server so then all those attacks just don't end up anywhere, and then work to block those attacks from continuing. The other point that you can do with a denial of service attack is hit a server so many times that its encryption breaks, or you're able to then log in and then access the rest of your network. And the other piece is sniffing attacks, which is very, very simple, and all you're doing is you're watching what people do on the traffic or on the network and seeing what they're doing and where they're going. And sometimes you can even capture passwords that are being sent. So here's a couple tools. Top right with the green lines, that's Wireshark, where you can monitor network traffic. And you can install this on any computer. It's 100% free, and you can watch what people are doing. You can see what they're accessing. Granted, if they're on a secure wireless network, most of that data is encrypted, but depending on the strength of the encryption, you can kind of backpedal and find out what they're actually getting to. The other one is Kali Linux, which is in the back, which is an operating system that's just chock full of different tools that you can utilize for traffic sniffing, to utilize as a wireless attack, a password attack, setting up a fake DNS box so people will connect to a different server that's not real. And that, again, is 100% free, and all the documentation to utilize it is free on the web. On the bottom left is a tool called Kane Enable that allows you to see available wireless networks, and using like a brute force attack, it can break into a secure wireless network. Granted, with some of the more secure wireless encryptions there are, it takes longer and it doesn't even work. But if you have a weak password, it's relatively simple to do. And the tool does a whole slew of other really cool tricks. So that's our outer defenses, types of threats, and ways to kind of combat and what tools people use to attack us. The next is our inner defenses, which is our switches, our server configurations. What can we do with our internal network that will help us be a little bit more secure? So another layer of defense. So if they get past the first layer, then we have another layer to help protect us. And this also protects more of our users as well. So we want to protect our internal traffic, so traffic from machine to machine on our inner defenses, as well as our outside traffic, so what's going outside and what's coming back in. And we can protect all of this through software configurations, through what's called group policy or a password policy, and then also hardware configuration. So what routing rules can we implement to help protect our environment? And so this is the ongoing joke of a system admin, where we have to limit a lot of access and only give you access to what you need for the most amount of security. So then this brings into our question of, is it good, is it bad, is it a barrier, why should we do it? So why we love it, why we love computer security and policies, is because it protects our computers from accidental damages. So people don't do something on accident, or install a software piece that they shouldn't, or go to a website they shouldn't be viewing. And then at the same time, that will help protect our data. And there's lots of things that go on that go on throughout the day that ensure the network runs efficiently. And so we want to make sure we utilize different tools. So Chris has a question for what do you use as a password manager? He favors KeePass. And what do you recommend for password change in building where staff hate changing passwords? Awesome. I will actually get to that in a couple slides. And then also with computer security and policies, when we talk about filtering, it also helps with network efficiency. So by limiting what people can view, like should staff be allowed to log into Facebook, that will help improve network efficiency because people aren't on Facebook or on YouTube or on Netflix. So what then lies at a barrier? The obvious choice is, or the obvious one is, you need to get to something to improve your job, and we're blocking it for whatever reason it may be. Let's say you're constantly installing software and you have to constantly log in as a different admin account. Yes, it stinks. But is it good or is it bad? For the most part, I always say you kind of have to roll with it. Patrons see it as a barrier. When they see all these policies, they're like, wow, I can't really do anything here. But at the end of the day, you need to reassure them that is to protect your data and protect what we do. And then, but in terms of filtering, it limits our access. It limits what we can do. So in terms of group policy, there are a ton of settings that you can set on a server level that will push to the rest of your devices. And so you can actually toggle things such as, are you even allowed to right-click on the desktop? And that can all be managed through what's called a global group policy editor, which is on the server, and then it will push out to your devices based off of a user group or a device group. So you can say, hey, all these patron computers, after 15 seconds or after 15 minutes, it logs them out. So all their data, if they're on websites, nobody else can sit down and start using their computer. So this is the free version of the tools that allow you to protect your machines. The name escaped me, computer reservation systems. And so by going through all these options and enabling them, you can essentially remove your computer reservation systems and actually automate the majority of that and save a ton of money. When we talk about updates, patches, and firmware, that's another component of our inner defenses that we should be considering. So a lot of security professionals say that you should always have the latest and greatest updates, or as soon as an update comes out, you have to install it. And I always say no to that. Unless if it's a major security flaw that's been finally patched, then definitely do it. But for the most part, you always kind of want to wait, see if an update causes more malicious activity to occur. And so what people do oftentimes is build a development environment where they can implement these software changes and see what happens. Does it bring the whole network down after you update? Yes, it does. All right, well then we probably shouldn't update yet. Let's find out why it brought our test environment down. And then when updates do come out, there's usually a big tech bulletin that goes along with it. And so while it looks terribly boring to read, it usually has a lot of information about, sometimes it even says, don't update this software if you're doing X, Y, and Z. And so review that content, review that data before you hit update or patch or upload the firmware. And then in terms of iDevices, so there's a tool called Casper Suite, which has been bought by a company called Jamf. And I'm not sure if I'm saying that name correctly. But what they'll do is if you have a suite of iPads, for instance, it can actually manage all of your iPad devices for you and make sure that things are updated correctly. What do they have access to? Are there passwords? Do you want to remotely wipe it? What apps should be installed? And you can manage it all from a single device or a single server, essentially. It's a pretty cool tool. Another tool that helps make sure updates are in place or allows people to install software without a password or without admin rights is a tool called SCCM, which is from Microsoft. That will then, it maps out your network, and then you put computers in groups, and then you can push out specific updates. So let's say you had a lab for AutoCAD, and you had a new version of AutoCAD. You can then upload that new version and send it directly to those computers, only those computers. There's also what's called a software library that a patron or a staff member can open and download software at will from a list of basically what you approve as approved software. And then we talk about switch configurations. We have routing rules. So how do you set up your networks to ensure that people don't see things they're not supposed to? So one of the best ways I like to do is split your network into groups. So you have your public LAN, which is your local area network, your staff LAN, your servers, and your wireless public. And you would route it in such a way so the public traffic will never ever touch your staff traffic. So if someone actually did install a sniffer, they're never going to be able to see what the staff does. Or if someone has a wireless laptop where they're trying to hack into things, if you set the router to only allow their traffic to go from their laptop, for instance, to the outbound port on the firewall, that's all they're going to be allowed to do. And so by setting these routing rules, you can help kind of mitigate a lot of that risk. Yes, there's still ways to kind of like loophole around. They can change their IP address and trick the firewall or router to make it think it's part of a different network. So to fix that, you can also do access restrictions. So you can limit which devices connect to your LAN, and you would do that usually by a MAC address. So you can say, hey, switch, if all of a sudden somebody plugs something new in you haven't seen before, block it. Block that whole port. Or in the firewall, you can say, hey, if a new IP address pops up in this range, block it. Don't let anyone go to it, or don't let it get to anything. And this will help prevent people from spinning up fake servers to kind of sniff traffic, to have people be a man-in-the-middle attack, etc. And the last piece is you want to limit port scanning or IP scanning, or essentially just sniffing around on the network. So if someone plugs something in and they want to see what's going on or what ports you have open, essentially trying to determine what flaws you have on your network, block that. Some of these sniffers use certain ports, and you can look up what those ports are, and you just disable them on the switch level or on the router level or the firewall level, and that will help prevent a lot of that. And then again, limit which networks have access to which ports. So how does data get trafficked through, on which ports and why, and how do you block it? And that's all can be done on the switch level. When we talk about our end devices, so this is where I'll get into passwords as well, we have to protect our business assets, and that includes from theft and hacking. And at the same time, we need to protect and secure personal devices from people attacking them and them attacking us. So usually when we talk about our end user devices, they can pose an inbound threat to our network as well when people are trying to get into our devices to attack them. So there's a really great tool that manages assets. It's from a company called Forescout, and their one software product is called Counteract. Essentially what Counteract does, and you can set this up for public networks as well, if a person comes into your library and they don't have antivirus software, you can actually block them from connecting to your network, which is really great to prevent people from bringing in a computer that has viruses on it. And those viruses are trying to replicate across the network. That won't allow them to connect. You can even dive down to level of security of a password to if they have the most recent updates, and you can classify different computers into groups. You can also it'll track. You can kind of do like a LoJack with it as well, and you can do all these really cool scripts with it. When we talk about passwords, length of passwords, complexity of passwords are all things that you have to consider. And don't use post-it notes. A person's everyday account as well, when we talk about like an IT professional, they shouldn't use their first dot last name to log in as an admin on a server. They should have their own admin account with the rights and roles assigned to it that allow them to get to that server. Same with even a director. If you're a director, your account necessarily shouldn't get you access to everything. It should only give you the access to what you need on a day-to-day basis. Then you can build a special admin account for access that you don't use as frequently. The reason for that is if that account gets compromised, usually people, when they're attacking a system, will identify, all right, if this person's name is Bill Bob, I'm going to look for Bill.Bob on the system because that's the most common. Hack that, get that password, and then utilize it. It's just kind of like a simple trick to help mitigate some of that risk. When we talk about how frequent to do password changes, yeah, most people hate changing their password, and that's just the bread and butter of it. Unfortunately, you have to continually changing your password, and I would frame it up to if someone compromises their account, they necessarily won't use it right away. They'll wait on it, and in order to gather more accounts and more passwords, and then do an attack all at once. And the reason why hackers do that and wait is they don't want to send up any red flags to the IT professionals. Because if they start hacking one account, then the IT professional will assume something's going on and start investigating. So if a hacker was smart, they'd wait it out because people don't like changing their passwords and gather more passwords and more accounts and then do a big attack. And so that would be a conversation you might want to have. For password management, do I have a picture of it? Cool. I like LastPass a lot. And they make enterprise editions that will connect to your Active Directory. Granted, you pay a premium for it, but at least all your passwords then can be in synced. And then you only have to remember one password, and the rest can be updated that way. And it makes life a lot easier. I've heard of KeePass. I haven't used it too frequently. I've installed it once, but in terms of LastPass, it's probably one of the better ones that are on the network. Does that answer your question, Chris? But at the end, and so in terms of frequency of password changes, some people do it as frequent as 3 months. Some people do it as frequent as 6 months. The frequency of changing the password kind of depends on the network, how many users you have, and what you're trying to do. In terms of, and going back to your question, Chris, in terms of what password software to use, LastPass I prefer. And in order to kind of get more staff on board, and this is a challenge for every IT professional, is share stories of how hackers gather data first, wait on it, and then implement all at once. So gather more passwords than just one. So by doing a frequent password change can help mitigate that risk. It doesn't prevent all, but helps mitigate it. And I'll tell my password secret. For my passwords, I actually change a symbol across the top of the keyboard. And so once a month, I move it to the next symbol instead of a number. And it works for me. I can remember it. It's simple. And you can share that as a password trick, if you will, for people that don't like changing their passwords frequently. If that doesn't answer your question, still feel free. We can talk offline as well. But usually, striking the fear in people will get them on board. Oops. One of the scariest bugs that are out there is called a crypto locker, and essentially what it does, and it's a worm that will propagate through your entire network and encrypting all the data it sees. So, and its goal is to get to the file server or the Exchange server and just encrypt all that data. So there was a business I worked with once that had that happen to them. Their business was down for a whole week, and they were a very large corporate entity, and so they weren't able to pay people for a week. They weren't able to bill people for a week. Their entire infrastructure was shut down because somebody had an email, they weren't sure what it was, and they installed it, and that sucker then connected to their file drives, their file shares, and then copied across all those files that other people had access to. When they opened the file, it kind of continued copying and continued pushing forward. And it ended up encrypting their entire servers. And I believe, if memory serves, it also started to attack their backups before they caught it. And it happens really, really quick. And the only way they say, to get it off is to pay through Bitcoin, pay a hefty fee, and then they will give you a key to unlock all your files. So tools help protect. One of my favorite is from ESEP. They have a suite called Smart Security that has an antivirus, a firewall. It actually will read your web and email for you. So as you're going to different websites and as you're reading email, it will check for common trends and ensure that those aren't malicious in any way. And for libraries, it's like dirt cheap per month. It's this was several years ago, but I paid less than $5 per user per year, and so it was a pretty good deal. But it works incredibly well, and there's not a lot of, it doesn't take up much bandwidth, and it doesn't take up much computer processing power. And it has a built-in load jack as well. Another tool that people commonly use is Malwarebytes. At the free level, Malwarebytes doesn't actively scan your computer. It doesn't check to make sure what you're about to access is safe. Unless if you pay for it, then it'll do what's called real-time scanning, so it'll scan data as it sees it happening. And then load-jacking is a really great way to ensure that people don't steal your stuff and take it home or sell it on eBay. So I actually bought a laptop once that was load-jacked, and essentially what happened was I booted that puppy up, connected the wireless network, did an update, restarted, and this is usually on the BIOS level, and so then it prevented me from doing anything else with the computer. I couldn't even log into the BIOS anymore, and it basically will take all the data and destroy it from a point it can't be recovered. I can't put in a new hard drive into the laptop because since it's on the BIOS level as well, it won't let me add any new drives, won't let me do anything to it. So I essentially bought a giant paperweight. Luckily, I was able to return it. Tell the guy I'll call him out on it, and that's how you can, at least when people steal your stuff, you can ruin their day. So now let's talk about training. Probably everyone's favorite topic and favorite thing to attend is IT security training. And I would encourage you to also train your patrons to understand different types of security. Victoria mentions that she uses Bitdefender or uses Bitdefender. I haven't used Bitdefender in a very long while. I gave it up once because it didn't do a good job for me. And I'm usually like one and done. As soon as it fails me, I drop it and work on a different product. It works really well from what I recall. It was heavy, it utilized a lot of processing power on your computer, and so I didn't like that. I wanted something lightweight, and so that's why I passed on Bitdefender. So common myths when we're talking about IT security training or just IT security in general, some of the common things I hear are, I'm not worth being attacked, I don't have a lot of money, no one's going to attack me, hackers won't guess my password, or I have antivirus, I'm good to go. And the most scary one is people always believe that they'll know if they've been compromised. They'll know if someone is hacking their computer because their computer runs slowly. And unfortunately, that's usually the case with only people that are trying to ruin your day. People that are trying to steal your data are a little bit more crafty and sly, and you won't know what's happening. So the best kind of training focuses on awareness. So you want to make sure that you get your staff to report issues immediately. If they see something, anything out of the ordinary, whether that's an email they received or a weird phone call or a link they saw on their screen and they clicked on it, let them know that it's safe to tell you or safe to tell the IT team. Nothing's going to happen to them, because some people are afraid that they're going to get fired if they open a bad email. Granted, if that's your policy, that's your policy. But you want to make sure that they alert you instead of trying to sweep it under the rug. Because as soon as you know, the sooner you can start mitigating that risk and start fixing it from happening anymore. And that even goes to teaching them, and I'm going to show some screens about what a fake website looks like or what a fake email might look like. Checking to see, and then at the same time monitoring what other people do. Not necessarily like hovering watchful eye, but if they see someone doing something suspicious or seeing someone not following the rules in your security training, like they're trying to install something, teach them that it's okay to tell someone about it, because at the end of the day, everyone's responsible for IT security. And I tell people to act as owners when talking about your computer assets and your data. We have to constantly think, we as library users or the rest of the staff have to go, hey, I own this data. What will happen if something happens to that data? So fake emails are sometimes fairly easy to spot. If you're using Gmail, you can click the little chevron and see where it was sent from, if it was encrypted, if it looks not normal. So if you've received an email from Google and it says myfakewebsite.com, it's not legitimate. And it's really easy to spoof emails. You can do that on a PHP server. And you can put in any domain you want and have it appear when you hit send. Or when you're hovering over links and they're not taking you to what looks like a legitimate link. If I was clicking at AOL, I would assume it would say AOL.com first. There's a good story. A friend of mine, their CFO, got an email from someone from accounting that masked their email address as an individual from accounting, saying, hey, I need to review all the W-2s. Can you please send them to me? And the CFO, assuming that that person was working on a project, it was a huge company with multiple branches and divisions, so he assumed that his group needed to give out all the W-2s, and he then packaged them all up and hit send. The IT team noticed a large amount of files were sent out suddenly from the CFO. They had these alerts in place. And then they looked into it and found out that someone spoofed another person's email, and the CFO sent out every single W-2 for every single employee for the whole company, which was very costly because all those because W-2s have your social, and so it was very costly for the company to then pay for everyone's identity protection. I think they paid it for 2 or 3 years for a giant corporation. And so we're sending data through email without vetting the person or even calling. If they go, hey, that's a weird request, they should probably call the individual first and validate and make sure that what they're requesting is actually from them. When we talk about SSL certificates, this is one. Most sites now have an HTTPS in front of their name, which essentially means that it's secured and it's encrypted traffic. Hackers aren't going to go through the effort of getting a legitimate SSL certificate because then it'll be easy to pin back on them. So if they're accessing a website that they normally access that doesn't have the little green checkbox or the green lock, they should probably alert an IT professional or someone on the security team and say, hey, this doesn't look right. So if you teach them to look for these simple cues like weird links, green locks missing suddenly, and I think Chrome now actually with a recent update will actually put not secure in front of every address that doesn't have an SSL certificate. Then we also have people that do call spoofing, where somebody phone calls and they're from Microsoft and they want to remote in and fix your computer. I actually was fixing somebody's computer once and they had that call happen right then and there. Really weird coincidence. And the lady firmly believed they were from Microsoft and they saw me trying to fix and they wanted to help. And I had to go, no, that's a coincidence. Microsoft doesn't care about you. They only care about what software you're about to buy from them next. And so, or even people, I got a phone call from my bank and they said, hello, this is your bank, tell you about a great credit card offer with your credit card. Would you like to accept? Or something like that. And I was like, yeah, that's not true. And so teach those people those tricks of the trade, if you will, that usually people don't reach out and want information about you first. If they truly knew who you were, they would already have that info. And now that tax season's around the corner, or is here, you'll get fake IRS calls too, saying, hey, this is the IRS. We need to review your file to confirm your identity. What is your social? They're not going to do that. Teach your people to hang up and then call the number on the back of the card, or go to the website and actually call the number off the site. The other thing too is teach people that Google isn't always your friend. When you're Googling, how do I download Firefox, sometimes the links you get aren't actually from Firefox, and it's from people that are trying to get you to install a fake version of their software to attack you maliciously. So teach people safe Googling etiquette. Some filters and some firewalls and some antivirus software will actually prevent those bad addresses from appearing on your Google page. And so again, we can use the tools to help protect our people. In terms of security as well, that's probably one of the most annoying things I've ever done, but I was actually breached once and continually re-breached or attempted to re-breach ever since. So I must have angered somebody somewhere in the world, and they were attempting to log in across every account I own, and I'm not sure, and they were just blanketing any type of tool, software, etc. that I might use on the internet. So I had to go through, and good thing I change my password frequently, and I had to go through and use something called dual-factor authentication for a lot of the accounts. So Google has it set up really nicely where there's an app you would download. When you type in your password, it'll say, what is your security code? This looks like a new computer to me. You would open up the app. It will tell you to type in a series of numbers, and you do so. PayPal will send you a text message. And there's other companies will actually make their own app that will give you a randomly generated code that's timestamped that'll only last an X amount of time, and you type it in, and then you're on your way. It stinks, but it's a really great tool. And then ad blocking is another thing you can do within your network to help kind of mitigate people from clicking on bad links. And there's a whole slew of them out there. And the last piece is using social engineering. And sometimes we're way too friendly with people, and we think everyone has the best intentions. And so there was an instance once where a person was calling an individual, and I worked for a call center at a university, and so they were calling the help desk, and they wanted to know what their grades were, and they played it up really well, going, hey, my mom's really on me. I really need to get my account reset. It's not letting me log in. I've already reset my password. And they pitched a really solid story. And so that person goes, oh, all right, I feel you. Here, let me get you your grades. And so then they would ask a little bit more about the person. Or just say, hey, when was the last time I was even signed in? When's that show up? And so they were able to gather all this info from just casual conversation. So it's really important to teach your staff and teach yourselves that when people are asking odd questions, chances are it might not be the actual person. So sites to help. Have I been pwned, or PWND, actually is a really great tool that if you punch in all of your information, like your email address, your name, etc., as soon as something is released on the dark web, or something's being sold, or something is hacked, they'll actually send you an alert saying, hey, your data is on this data set of potentially being attacked, or your account. So change your passwords, and any account that utilizes that same password, you should probably change as well. Curbs on Security is a great blog that talks about what's going on in the IT security world. And then we want to talk about our data and our privacy. LifeLock and Identity Guard are great two paid software tools. Identity Guard will actually check the dark web for your information being posted. And so during my phase of people trying to get into my account, a widely used software program that's used by IT people was posted and shared and sold. And so luckily I don't have the same passwords for everything, but there's something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. So to recap, we're talking about our defenses. We have our outer defense that utilizes filtering, intrusion protection, or intrusion detection, antivirus. Our inner defenses, which where we manage our servers, group policy, our routings. And we have our end-to-end devices with software and firewalls. And then we protect our end users with good use of passwords and training. There's a slew of, well, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to speed up. There's a slew of compliance standards that we should be aware of. So there's SIPA and FERPA. That in terms of filtering, we need to be aware of what SIPA simple mandates. If we're E-rate funded, we have to filter our internet. Oops, sorry. In terms of FERPA, it's making sure that if you're a school that receives funds, you want to make sure you protect their data and privacy. If we accept credit cards, there are certain standards within our network we have to implement in order to be compliant. You can't just buy a Square and call it a day. You got to make sure that you're on a secure wireless network, etc. Sarbanes-Oxley, or the SOX, requires companies to maintain financial records for 7 years. So making sure that your data is recoverable is part of the act, and making sure your data is secure is also part. And then there's service organization controls. So there's SOX 1, 2, and 3. 2 is probably a little bit more related to us, where we want to make sure we provide like business continuity that's focused on security training, ensuring that people will be smart on our networks, and ensuring privacy in our systems. You don't have to actually go out and get the certification, but it's a great tool to benchmark what you do have and how you can improve. When we talk about building a security plan, we want to identify all of our risks, figure out how we're going to do our training plans, talk a lot about policies. So you're talking about training policies. What should you do if you're breached? What should the policies be on assets? What should our computer use policy? What can and can you not do on your computers? And then backup plans. How are you going to recover data from a threat? And how are you going to recover an entire system if it's been threatened? So risk assessment is kind of like a three-pronged approach. We have to worry about threats, which are sources of danger to our information, and vulnerabilities, which are our weaknesses, which include our people, our tech we're using, any process we have. And those two at the intersection point make up our risks. So, and those are defined as our events that will happen if something happens to a threat or something happens to an exposed vulnerability. And so your security policy is just a continued movement of identifying your risks. How are you going to measure those risks? What are you going to do to implement to fix those risks? Do those fixes work? Assess those and see if those actually are protecting your network or your environment. And so this is where you do a lot of auditing. Should we get a security certificate for our library, Robin asks. I would say yes, because as we move forward, I think more browsers are going to start restricting access to non-secure sites. And so they'll prompt probably at some point very soon to say, are you sure you want to go here? It's not that hard to get. The requirements are a private IP address, and the certificate is usually like 15. It's not too expensive. I think I paid $15 for a year. I have to check. And essentially what the certificate ensures that you validated who you are. Your website's not accessing non-secure sites. So if you're embedding content from another source and that isn't a secure source, your SSL cert would be invalid. And then do you have a list of all the security tools and websites you can share? I can put a rough one together of all my top picks if you like. Feel free to email me, Anne, and I can send that over to you. And so security plans as a whole are tested and audited. And so we want to audit our usage. We want to audit how frequently people are accessing stuff. We want to audit our network logs, who's accessing where, check our computers routinely, and then writing down if a computer had malicious software, because then that would mean that there's a flaw somewhere and you have to then fix it, which would then get to your refine process. So what should we have implemented that would have prevented that virus from occurring? What should we have implemented to prevent that erroneous login? And then plans are always followed. There shouldn't be exceptions to the rule. Just because you're the head of IT doesn't mean the plan doesn't apply to you. Or just because you're the director of the library, you're a member of the board, the plans it's supposed to be designed so everyone follows it regardless of rank. So there's a really great website that I posted at the bottom here that says, it's like an employee tip sheet, and it talks about some of the big main items, and it even includes stuff about passwords if you were interested. But it kind of explains how cybersecurity is not an option. You have to think constantly, what am I doing on the computer? Can that impact the network in any way, shape, or form? This data I'm looking at, what would happen if that data gets out? Think like an attacker. So if I was going to attack this system, what tricks would I do? And good security has many layers, so meaning it's people, process, and technology. Are there any other questions? Sean, go ahead and email me and I'll put a list together And I'll also share it with Louise as well so she can post it with the PowerPoint.
All right. Thank you, Brian. We've got a few more minutes so we can give folks a minute or two if they have any more questions to type in. I know I will be working on updating all my passwords in the next week or so. So thank you, Brian, for sharing this. I don't have an IT background, so I really appreciate having this information. I hope it was helpful. We did record today's session, and usually it takes me a day or so to get that processed and posted on our website. So yes, I will try to get that posted well before the next session. Part 2 is next week, the 28th, again at 10 a.m. And correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, you're talking about privacy in the dark web next week?
Yep, so we're going to cover how to get to the dark web, different things that are on there, how to protect your network through like private VPNs, what that all entails, and just pretty cool stuff together. Most of it's classified.
Sounds great. And yes, when I post the recording, I'll share Brian's slides. Will you put those on SlideShare again, Brian?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, awesome. All right. I don't see any other questions. Lots of thank yous. So thanks again, Brian. I really appreciate your time today. And thank you all for joining us this morning. And like I said, I'll get this recording posted as soon as possible, and I'll email it to the link to everybody. And we'll see you next week.
Perfect. Thanks. Bye, everyone. If you have questions in the future or you didn't feel like asking today, feel free to shoot me an email. I reply within a day or two usually.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Thanks, Brian. See you next week.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.